Well, I'm joined today by Helen Tanton, and Helen is a postdoc research fellow at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute out in Boston. Helen, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Perfect. Thank you very much for joining us. I wonder if first of all you could give us a quick introduction into yourself, your career, education, and what you're doing now, and how you ended up at the Dana-Farber Institute.
Yes, I did my bachelor's degree at the University of Bristol in physiological science, and I really enjoyed the cellular and molecular aspects of my degree. So I searched for PhDs in that sort of area. So I applied for about 7 different PhD programs, got 2 or 3 interviews, and got a place at one at the University of Liverpool. So it was a PhD in cellular and molecular physiology. And the first year was made up of like a master's year where I rotated around different labs. It was funded by the Wellcome Trust, and this is a classic. This is very normal for them. They do 1 year where you rotate around labs, find out what you enjoy doing and what you'd like to spend your PhD research in. And then I spent the next 3 years, the next 3 years working in the lab that I'd chosen to complete my PhD. And then I think towards year 2, year 3, the last year of my PhD, I started to feel that I wanted to do a postdoc. I wanted to continue my career in academic science. And I particularly wanted to work in America. I was told that it looks very good to work in science in America on your CV, and it's a different type of environment. I also thought it would look good as a way of make me seem more independent. If I had that ability to transition to a different country and a different environment. So I applied to the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. It's a really great institute, and I was lucky enough to get a postdoc position here.
And going sort of way back, growing up, when did your sort of passion and interest in science start to develop? Was it at a very, very young age, or maybe at high school when you started to do more sort of scientific subjects?
I think probably GCSEs was when I started to, was the very start of me enjoying science. And then when I did my A-levels in biology, chemistry, maths and English literature. And at first, because I enjoyed science, I assumed I wanted to be a doctor, a medical doctor. And actually had a very good career advisor at my school, and I discussed this with her. And she said, I don't think you want to be a medical doctor, I think you want to be a scientist, because that's where my passion was. So that's when I started really seriously enjoying science and thinking that it was something I wanted to have a career in.
And fast forward today, obviously the world of sort of postdocs and PhD and research can be quite confusing for sort of current undergrads. What does a day in the life of Helen Tanton look like? Can you talk us through, your day-to-day activities?
Yes, it's very different. Every day can be very different. I'm rarely at my desk. I rarely sit down, which I like. The day goes very fast. So during the PhD, you sort of learn how to be independent. So you're guided by your mentor, but you do trial and error for your experiments. You come in, you do your experiments, you go home, you try again the next day until it works. And your mentor will guide you through that process. And then for the postdoc, that continues. Apart from you're more independent in a postdoc. So I will very much plan my experiments myself. I do keep my mentor, my boss, updated, especially if I have problems. But generally, I'm on my own, or I discuss problems with my colleagues. So I do lots of different types of experiments. In the postdoc, there's additionally there can be a lot of writing grants and grant progress reports. I have more responsibilities in the lab, such as making sure that the equipment's working, making sure everything's ordered. So there is a lot more responsibility in a postdoc, but every day can be different because I do different types of experiments, and you never really know when you're going to start. When you're going to start work, you never quite know when you're going to finish. You finish when it's done. When the experiment or the work is done.
And for current students who might be considering continuing their education and going into PhD level and going into research, what advice would you give them?
I would probably advise them to make sure it's something that they really wanted to do. It's not a light decision. I knew I loved science and I wanted a career as a scientific researcher. So for that, I knew I needed to get a PhD. But I worry that some people can, when they come out of university, especially because in the UK, our degrees, undergraduate degrees are quite short. Sometimes people feel a bit scared. Now I've got to get a job in the big wide world. I don't know what I want to do. Where do I go from here? And I think people can think, oh, I'll do a master's or a PhD. Stay in the secure educational bubble and think, oh, well, I enjoy that topic. I'll do a PhD in it. But that sort of attitude would probably be picked out during an interview if the interview process is good. And it's important that you don't go into a PhD for the wrong reasons, because it's very, very tough. And it's tough even for people that love it. So you can imagine how tough it is for people whose heart isn't really in it.
Yeah.
So I'd say, make sure that it's something that you really want to do. Understand what you're getting yourself into. And your mentor is crucial, actually. I think it's really worth taking some time into asking other people in the lab how they feel doing their PhD, trying to get into contact with them, because your mentor, I think, can really make or break a PhD. If you've got someone that's very supportive, then that's fantastic. And if not, or if your mentor has a lot of other responsibilities and doesn't have much time for you, that can make it really challenging.
And I'm presuming here that you've transitioned quite well into life in America successfully. How was that, and how was that experience going into America, coming out of British education?
It was scary at first. I remember being on the flight thinking, oh my goodness, what am I doing?
This is it.
Yes, I didn't know anyone in Boston. I'd never been there before. So it was daunting, but I was told before I went that American research is more fast-paced, it's more competitive, you'll be working all the time, don't expect to have any breaks or holidays. That was probably a bit dramatic. It can be, it is hard work, but it really depends on the type of lab you're in, what type of mentor you have. So the work-life balance can be difficult, but that can be said of any postdoc probably across the world, whether you're in Europe or America. One thing that I did find difficult is that our PhDs in the UK are 3 years, whereas in the US they're normally at least 5, maybe 6 years long.
Okay.
So that affects how much you publish papers. So for example, I published my data from my PhD so I'm the first author on one publication from that, whereas a PhD student in America would probably be expected to publish maybe 2-3 times.
Okay.
So when I came here, even though I'm a lot younger as a doctor than American students, American postdocs, they have more publications than I. And when I'm applying for American funding, they find it strange that I've only got one publication. So it's trying to be competitive against American students that I think can be difficult when they don't realise the process in the UK.
Mm. And if you were responsible for sort of hiring a new colleague to come and work in the lab, a fresh grad maybe, what skills, experience and perhaps personality traits do you think is important in your line of work?
In terms of experience, I think a lot of people can worry, I don't know how to do that technique, I don't know how to do this. I wouldn't worry about that so much. I think it's good to have enough experience that I would think this person truly wants to do this. But I wouldn't expect loads of experience. You're not expected to know everything before you do a PhD. So just the ability to learn, really. Mm-hmm. If I can see examples in someone where I know they're going to pick up techniques, and I think personality traits I would look for: organisation. You've got to be very organised. You have to be able to prioritise experiments, You have to be quite self-motivated and driven, especially if you don't have a mentor that's with you all the time. So you have to be able to be independent, and a personality that won't let themselves get too down if experiments are failing, because that's normal. Experiments do fail most of the time, but then when it does work, it's great. So the ability to get through difficulties and pick yourself up when you're down. That's what I look for.
And I'm going slightly off piece here, but what would your advice be, or your thoughts perhaps on women in STEM? And obviously there's been great news recently about Katie Bowman, the scientist who obviously captured the black hole for the first time. And, you know, for so many young girls are now starting to get into STEM. What would your advice be for them?
Yeah, I think it's great. And it's great being in Boston because she's at MIT, and that we're actually able to go to a talk on that soon.
Oh, amazing. Which is great.
I love women in being in science. I love hearing about it. It was my mentor at the University of Bristol who was female, and she was a professor and had a family, and I thought, right, if she can do it, I can do it as well. I think there can be quite a lot of women in science at the PhD level, but you find as the career progresses, then there starts to be a decline, and there's a lot fewer female heads of labs, and there has been studies to show that on average female scientists get fewer funding, less resources. So what would my advice be for women in science? You won't be looked down on because you know it's 2019, luckily. So you would hope that people aren't going to treat you any differently. I'm not sure what I would advise. Just do what you want to do. If it's something that you're interested in, you have a passion for, just do it and work things out as you go along. I know Harvard and MIT, for example, you know, this is thinking way in the future. If it is a concern of some women to have a family at the same time, I know that a lot of big institutions are offering more support there now. And I think what would be important for the field to do is to encourage women back into science. For example, if they have had time off to have a child, science moves so quickly. So just missing out on 6 months to a year can be huge. Yeah. You know, so many discoveries happen in that time. So I think it's that's something that they need to work on, is making sure, you know, women are able to feel like they can come back.
Transition back into working.
Yes.
One last thing before we let you go. I'm sure you've got lots of important things to be getting back to, but is there anything else you would tell sort of our listeners about the benefits of staying in academia and working at the cutting edge of research?
So I would say the main advantage of working in academia is flexibility, both in the hours that you work, because you can, you know, whenever you work best, you might be a morning person or an evening person, you can work those hours that suit you, but also flexibility in terms of what you want to research. So in academia, you might find something that's unexpected and interesting, so you can veer off in a different direction to what you'd planned. Sometimes the best discoveries are made that way, you know. Yeah. But in the industry, for example, it's not as flexible as that. Sometimes you are told what you need to work on, and your project might be cut one day because of, you know, changing priorities or targets or strategy. And industry is run a lot more like a business, which does have its advantages, don't get me wrong. But if you're the type of person that enjoys the freedom of being independent and coming up with your own ideas, taking the project in the direction that you want, then I think that person might be well suited in academia. And of course, it's very exciting and satisfying to work at the cutting edge of research. All the new discoveries are happening, and you might be working on something or find something out that has never been known before, which is great. You think, I'm the only person in the whole world who knows this, and
who does tell really first?
Yes, yeah, and it might not be that big, but even small things, it feels very satisfying when you achieve, when you discover something.
Amazing. Well, Helen, thank you so much again for joining us. I'm sure this will be really useful for those, thinking of going into sort of postdocs and PhD levels. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good. I hope it's helpful. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed episode 1 of Behind the Job. Some great insight from Helen into PhD, postdoctorate life, and transition into studying and working in America. Thanks to Helen for joining us, and next week we've got another great guest lined up providing insight into their industry and job. Daniel Benzie is the lead software developer at the startup Housey. He'll be providing insight for us into what he does, his unconventional journey as a software developer, and insight into what he looks out for when he's hiring fresh grads to join his development team. Enjoy it. Have a good one.